how do you go about? Do you have any forward or anything before I start?
Just a moment, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hmm.
Yes, ma'am. Shall we start?
Yes, yes.
Very good morning to one and all. Sorry for the inconvenience caused at the starting due to some technical difficulties. We are starting today for the today's session. I take it a great privilege to introduce you to our expert speaker for the session. Speaker is Mr. Subbu Iyer. Mr. Iyer is founder of Giga Technologies Private Limited. He is also founder and CEO of REAM, which facilitates innovations that dramatically improves the quality of living in every sphere of life, as they say. Sir is a strategic business and technology leader capable of creating growth through revenue and intellectual property through the core of design thinking, digital transformation, design, and innovation. Sir has designed, architected, and delivered platform, products, processes, and projects globally that stand out for the econometric transformative models in B2B, B2C, C2C, and B2B2C space. Sir had delivered disruptive solutions across industry sectors, including healthcare, education, banking, financial services and insurance, life sciences and pharma, telecommunication and entertainment, to name a few. Sir is people's leader who brings all the five essential dimensions of aspiration, agility, anticipation, authenticity, and ability. I'm sure you all are going to enjoy today's session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Bhakti. Um, Good morning to you all. Once again, it's not very nice to kind of start a session with glitches, but anyway, here we are. This is what we can do right now. So let me. I just want to understand one thing. I normally like our lectures to be interactive. I'd like to know how we are going to interact. So please feel free to ask me questions as we go along because we learn as we ask questions. So how is it that we're going to make this work? How being interactive? Anyone? So are you going to share questions on the chat so I can see them so I can answer them?
Sure, sir, you can do that.
Okay, great. So we'll go to the next slide uh, so we can start off. So I think the topic for today was design strategies. Now the reason why I brought this out, I wanted to basically set the understanding of intent drive strategy. So there is, even if we were to conventionally understand, strategy, strategy is what action is oriented about, and intent drives it. So there is a strategic intent which basically drives strategy, which is basically where we should also understand the context of design thinking and design. So these are not two the same things at all. Design thinking is essentially one bridges the potential with performance, whereas design is what enables strategy to be delivered. So, so I think one is basically performance, the other is potential. So the idea of design thinking or intent is essentially to understand the potential and then create a strategy that delivers performance, which basically scales continuously or builds capability continuously towards enabling that strategic intent. So I think this was essentially something that I wanted to establish upfront, and I kind of wanted to understand from our audience here, whether we all are on the same page. Can anyone basically switch on your microphone and talk about what you think? Anyone from the audience, please? No? Hello? Can I ask, okay, may I ask you, may I frame a question and ask you, why is it important for us, for example, at the beginning of this topic, to even understand the essential difference? So the topic being design research strategies, right? Why is it important to understand the criticality of intent driving strategy?
Sir, if I may say, my name is Zora.
Yeah.
I believe, sir, that design thinking is something wherein the end user, we have to empathize with the end users, and whatever product or services that we are designing, it has to meet the needs of the users. So there should be a protocol or a strategy, a plan or direction on which our next steps, and how we gonna go ahead and do that. So maybe because of this reason, you are more onto strategic thinking, and you know the desire to achieve whatever is there you have visualized.
Zara, thank you so much for bringing that answer. This is the reason why I said we have to be interactive, because I can keep on going with my perspective, but I believe that at the end of this lecture, to me, the outcome is that we are able to agree on a few common threads of perspectives, right? So you talked about so this lecture, that is, if we go to the next slide, the next page, right? So we're going to be looking at two aspects. I'm going to introduce a few basics which perhaps probably all of you know. So when we talk about design research strategies, there is both the quantitative and qualitative research that we're talking about. But we are going to pause on that, and on design thinking, the difference between design thinking and design. You touched upon the term called empathy with the user, right? Empathy with the user. So if you all pause and think for a second, where we are on this planet today, right? We most of us, or many of us, don't know exactly what the digital holds in terms of its potential, in order to be able to present us options that we can make a choice about. So if I were to empathize with someone and say, okay, let's build a future system based on what you know currently, right? Would it make sense? The obvious answer is no, it wouldn't make sense, right? So essentially, design thinking is not about, it is about empathy, but it is about empathy where you can immerse a potential user, a potential customer, a potential individual, or even groups of individuals or societies or enterprise, towards orienting towards the future, towards what are the emerging challenges, and therefore the strategy is about being able to meet that future from the present. So in order to understand that, for example, if I were to say that, how do we need to understand that the approach to design research itself needs to change. It cannot be what it was before, but nevertheless, I think we still go with the two aspects, right? So I think the very aspect of the demography, the biography, and the psychography. These are the three things which we try to assess from both the quantitative and qualitative research. In fact, from the quantitative research, it is more oriented towards demography. The qualitative research is more oriented towards the biography and psychography. So anyone in this audience, have you done research essentially which includes all the three, the demography, the biography, and the psychography, before I can actually expound on that a little bit further? Anyone, please? I would really request all of you to just switch on your microphone wherever you have to, and be participative. Okay. So we have this, the quantitative research that is all about collecting, analyzing numerical data, and finding and establishing patterns, right? So we are talking about establishing patterns from the data that has already been transacted, right? So if we have, I have a question for the audience. If we were supposed to understand the future from the present, we don't have an established data. How are we going to do quantitative research on something that we have to design? We have to design a strategy for the future. Can anyone give me an insight into how you would do that? Anyone?
Sir, good morning. So maybe, we could use the existing data and build on it.
Okay, so stay with me for a few minutes. So you talked about building on existing data. The existing data is, for example, not relevant to the future. Let me take an example, right? So
Yes.
if you were looking at banking, for example, right?
Yes.
A few years ago, how was banking done? So you had to go to the bank, and you had a clerk across a counter. If you wanted to open a bank account, the person gave you a form, and then you filled up the form, and it took a few days before they let you know whether you could
Open
have
an
a bank
account.
account or not with them, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now think about this for a brief minute. This is actually your money, right?
Yes.
You are trying to put this into the bank account, and the bank is actually there, is a body that is there to actually serve that very purpose, right?
Yes.
Why are they verifying you? And if at all the verification is necessary, why is it taking them time? So obviously the answer is that they did not have the systems like they have today.
Yes.
That was faster, that was better, right?
Yes.
And today, after five, how do we do banking? You can open a bank account in less than 20 minutes,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But I would go further and say that you don't even need 2 seconds in order to have a bank account. Why 20 minutes? Right? But
Yes.
that is not the matter. The matter is not about whether or not you require 2 days or 20 minutes or 2 seconds. The issue is the entire experience and engagement of what is banking for you as an individual. Right? So now
Yes.
we are in a life situation where we are talking about, in the past, life moved at a very, very slow pace. Products and processes and life, there was no internet. A majority of the people did not have the need to basically act at a certain level of speed and a certain level of quality. And so they were followers. There were only a few people who had the power. But today, when every one of us has that power, right?
Yes.
I mean, imagine this: if you have a powerful wand in your hand, which you wave and you can create stuff, will you just keep that in your hand, or will you wave it?
Wave it, definitely.
Absolutely. So when you are going to wave that, this is the power of waving. That is the idea of what that future is, and therefore how you need to wave. You also need to, they say that, wish for the right thing, because wishes will come when wishes come right. You have to be able to enjoy that wish, right? So
Yes.
you need to know what is the potential of the wand that you have in your hand, that when you wave, and you can wave for the right thing to happen. So the idea is, therefore, so in the past, when you did research in order to create something, right, to build a
Yes.
strategy to create something, yes, you built it out of existing data, because that data had a shelf life, right?
Yes.
But today's data does not have that shelf life. The shelf life, which means, I mean, you understand shelf life from the
Yes,
point of view.
yes.
So now what you need to do is you need to have a different way in which you create that shelf life. And the way you create that shelf life is you hypothesize your future. And when you hypothesize your future, you create it and you get immersive. And that is the only way in which you're going to know the power of the wand that you have in your hand to create magic, to create the magic that is the future. So your existing data, so you're creating by immersion, you're creating through experience new data, right? And that data is what is going to shape your understanding of your future. So, you know, in the past, we arrived at the future where somebody designed it for us, right? Today, we are in a situation where we have the power to design it immersively. And therefore, the idea of quantitative research, of how you want to find even numerical data for establishing a pattern, has to be very different from how it was done before. So, which is basically on quantitative data. But if you look at qualitative data, which is your biography, your psychography, and I'm going to take a very relevant, pertinent example from, you know, based on all of our understanding. You know, when I ask every single person in this audience, do you have an understanding of your how your money, your data relating to your wealth? All of you will tell me to a large extent that you do, right? But if I ask you, do you have you know, data relating to your health? And if I ask you to pause and think about it in the three sections of demography, biography, and psychography, I guarantee you that the answer, including me, is we don't have that data, right? We don't have our own demography in terms of us and our 6 degrees of separation. We don't have even the data that we talk about from a biography. If we had medical episodes, the medical records that we have, the records that we have are basically static data. The dynamic data is resident perhaps with different medical institutions or physicians or so on. And psychography is definitely something that we don't have. Otherwise, we would, all of us across the globe, we would not have suffered the problem with the pandemic we have had, right? We would have forced the authorities that are there to basically do the 4 things that were absolutely necessary from the beginning, which was the test, the track, the trace, the test, and the treat, which could have basically shortened the life cycle of the pandemic and increased the efficacy of the treatments that were brought about. So, and to that effect, you know, I think what we're talking about is we need to, if we have the data, so imagine this, if we have the data about our biography, that is from the time, so what are the 3 things that health is you know, concerned about? Health is concerned about 3 principal pieces of data. The data which is heredity, the data that is you know, at the time that you were born, the congenital conditions, and then the socio-physiological conditions that you acquire every day. And when we have the IoTs, the sensors, the scanners, the wearables capturing all this data, it is easy to compute that data, right? So biography is something that you know is now advancing from, you know, being where a few institutions could do it to where you individually can actually do it. And psychography, the way in which we think, the way in which we act, the way in which we live our lives today is very different from how we lived our lives 5 years or 15 years or 50 years before. So the point I'm trying to establish before I move further is the need for, you know, we cannot keep doing research the same way. We cannot design research the same way and try to build strategies out of them the same way that we did before. there is a fundamental shift in the quality and quantity of data that we today can basically analyze and make meaning and bring intelligence out of. So I think that is the principal point that I'm trying to establish as I move into the next slide. Before I move into the next one, can anyone anyone have questions? Because I know I've talked about a lot of abstract. Unfortunately, this virtual does not help us to see the body language, so I can pause and perhaps explain it a little better. So do you have any questions? No questions? That only indicates two things. Either I'm really good or I'm really bad. I don't know which it is. Okay. All right, let's take it to the next slide. So can I know one thing? How many of you here are researchers in this audience? Can at least one of you give me a kind of understanding? What are all your backgrounds? So does anybody do research? Because there are 5 types of research. I want to understand how much time I can spend on the basics before I really go to the core of the subject.
Participants, please interact.
Can anyone can you please tell me, is there anyone? Okay, let's look at it this way. Is there anyone in this audience who does not do research, who does not have the need, or who does not understand research? Okay. So anyway, so I'm just going to go on a limb here and try and explain the 5 aspects of design research. So the first one is basically descriptive research design. Here, if you choose, look at the word that I have used here. You don't ask questions. You frame questions. Design is something that where it's a very so when you combine this term called design and you can combine research, if you really want to basically derive intelligence out of research, one of the most important things to understand is how do you frame questions, not ask questions, which is why the fundamental of a design is not inquiry, not ENQUIRY, which is asking a question. It is INQUIRY, which is really reflecting on the what of it, the purpose of it, right? So the first type of design research that you do is a descriptive research, where you try to understand the purpose. The second type of design research is basically experimental in nature, where you frame the questions as why. The why is a strategic justification to the purpose. The third type of design research is basically correlational. That is, you're correlating. We just discussed a minute ago or a few minutes ago that we have an existing way of life, whether it is banking, whether it is in health, whether it is wealth, whether it is education, whether it is environment, mobility, technology. So there is an existing way, and that existing way is becoming a different way because of technology, the digital technology, the generational gap. So that how is basically is a correlational research, and this research is designed differently. Then we have a diagnostic research design, the fourth type, where you frame the questions that are interrelated to the what, why, how, when, and where. These are the 5 constructs of creating a design anyway. And the 5th one, of course, is the explanatory research design, which is basically framed on what if, then when, which is the 2 statements. What if this were in a different way? This is the 5th part, exploratory research design, that we talked about, where we don't know, what we don't know. So I usually go with this understanding. So many of us think about knowledge as what we know, and perhaps that is the biggest fallacy. Or research is also not about knowledge. Research is about finding out what you don't know. So, and therefore knowledge is not what you know, but what you do with what you don't know. So if we were to basically reframe the context of knowledge that we are talking about, is what you do with what you don't know. So you first have to surface what you don't know, and then you have to figure out the strategy of what you do with that what you don't know, right? So these are the five types of research design. Can I ask anybody in the audience if you have done research and if you have used any of these 5 methods and what your experience is? Anyone, please?
So I haven't got the opportunity to get onto research. So this is really interesting. So go on.
Okay. So let me ask another question. Now, so research is normally being done by a bunch of people. Even if you look at big organizations, right? They have a research and development wing. Do you think that is the right way to go about? Or you have today research has to be done by a larger section of all of us, as the people?
So there should be a department. However, they should further they should further take the data and inputs from all the other departments, because everybody does not have the access, time, and the potential to go ahead and get into the research. So the wing should be there.
Okay. So I think, may I know who is answering that question?
So Zora, that's
Zora,
my name.
Yeah, Zora, thank you so much. See, I want you, if you don't mind, to put that on a parking note, because I am kind of going to bring you a very different perspective in the next few slides, as well as because I'll come back to you, Zora, to ask you that question again later, to see whether you change your opinion or not. All right. So can we just park that? And so your answer to the question was that you need to have a department, but however you need the involvement of others, primarily because everyone doesn't have the time, perhaps the method, to be involved in research, right? This was your answer. I hope I paraphrased it correctly. So I will.
Yes, however, just to add on to it, sir, it's because the reason why they should involve other departments, it's just to get a different perspective.
Right. Absolutely, to get a different perspective, right? Okay, so let me take you to the next slide then, and so I am going to. This is a methodology that has been invented or authored by me. So to a large extent, the methodology that I have built here, is something that goes as a foundation to design thinking, right? So if you look at this is an XY plot. This is an XY plot. The Y plot is strategic value. The X plot is time, right? So in the very first instance, I think on an XY plot, what you would understand is the the point of confluence of the xy is basically where you either find the present and you can find the future, right? So you have these 4 points of data, which is needs, wants, expectations, and aspirations. Just by looking at this plot, Zora or anybody else, I'm asking Zora because you're coming back on the mic to basically speak. I wish there would be others here who would basically. Is there anyone who looks at this and says, "Oh, I understand this"? Does anybody in this audience understand this plot? Okay, let me explain this plot. So,
Sir,
yeah.
yeah. Actually, it is a good morning, sir. First, okay. So it is XY plot, and on Y plot, actually, it is a expectation, a strategic value are there, and on X-axis you have the expectation and the aspiration, and this is the graph for purpose of driven research. There.
Right. So do you understand the point of confluence of X and Y?
Uh, yes, sir. There is a strategic value and how much expectation you have achieved according to your strategic value, and it will represent in this way.
Okay. So thank you. May I know your name, please?
Yeah, Dr. Madhuri.
Dr.
Madhuri.
Dr. Madhuri. Thank you so much for that contribution. So let me go ahead and start giving you a brief explanation of this this XY plot. Now, in research, you're basically trying to understand your typical audience, right? So before we even understand the audience, we need to know how to understand them, correct? What to understand of them, why to understand them, and how to understand them. So if we look at these 4 data points, needs, wants, expectations, and aspirations, right? Consider them as 4 blocks. Unfortunately, this diagram that you're seeing here is a PDF diagram, so it looks static. I was going to show you a more dynamic diagram, when I was presenting it. So each of those points are basically flash points, but nevertheless. So needs basically are things that we are able to state. It's very clear, that we have this need. Like, I have a need. I'm 18 years old. I want to go and study in the United States. I have a need for an educational loan, right? It's very clear. I can state that, right? What happens? So this is for a person who has gone through the education, who has the context, who is in a middle or upper middle class family. So we're looking at the socioeconomic circumstance. But what about the person who is in a chawl, who has not had the formal education? What is their need? Their need is very different. At 18, their need is that I need to basically have food for, today morning and today evening. So our needs, basically where we are able to state very, very clearly, are the needs. When those needs, the stated needs, according to our thinking, is met, right? They become expectations. So this is a strategic value. When you think that I need an education loan and I get that loan at the end of the day, it's basically, you have basically the expectation of that need met. To the other, if I don't earn this money today, I will go hungry. And so if you didn't earn that money, and you didn't earn that money for one day, you have a certain amount of hunger. For 2 days, it increases the hunger. Then the want becomes more urgent. The need that is unfulfilled, the stated need that is unfulfilled, becomes a want over a period of time. Expectations that are fulfilled consequently allow you to basically look at higher aspirations. Aspirations is nothing but a threshold of capability, right? So in this case, what we are looking at is, so aspiration is something that is rarely captured by researchers. They try to capture the need, which is basically stated. They may capture a want, which is over a period of time, or an expectation. But aspiration is rarely captured. What is your aspiration? Why, if you capture the aspiration, then you perhaps can design a system for the future. But if you capture the needs, wants, and expectations, you're capturing the aspirations for the present. And that is all you're able to build a system for. Am I right or am I wrong? Anyway, so how do we take this? How do we capture the most important aspect that we need to understand is we are at a strategic inflection point on this planet. A strategic inflection point. This terminology called strategic inflection point is extremely critical to understand. Can anybody in this audience explain what is a strategic inflection point? Whether you do design, whether you do design thinking, whether you do research, whether you do research strategy, this is a fundamental understanding that you need to know. The strategic inflection point is the point where we can either take off towards extreme progress or take off towards extreme regression. This is the point. This is a very decisive point, and therefore it is called the strategic inflection point. Right? Why do we say that we are on the planet today where we are at a strategic inflection point? Anyone? Dr. Madhuri?
Either we can do.
I'm sorry?
Either we can do or we can die. It's, I mean, that much of a contrast.
See, today, I don't know if I'm going to have the same audience for my next lecture, but today there are 7 stations of life. Okay? We actually travel as human beings on this planet across these 7 stations of life daily. Okay? What are they? They're environment, education, health, wealth, mobility, technology, and governance. These are the 7 stations of life, where we operate. If you look at each one of them, right? Each one of them is at a point of crisis. Now, we either have the opportunity to go deeper into the crisis and get embroiled more. So we are at that point. Or we can basically eliminate them and create a new and better society. That is the point of inflection that we are on currently. Right? So the question to ask, therefore, and if I were to basically explain this in a more simpler manner, I would basically like to take the example of the credit card. I'm sure each one of us has a credit card, right? And each one of us, we all have different credit limits for our credit cards. This credit limit has been given to us based on our ability to earn income and therefore repay the credit. So if we were basically having a credit limit of, let's say, 100 rupees, and we exhausted that credit limit, and every month we are paying, let us say, the minimum balance of let's say 1.5 rupees, in order to just meet the requirement of minimum payment. How do you see this graph going here? You see this graph basically in the area of needs. Okay, this graph will never move beyond needs, and at some point in time it will come into wants, because you are, even though you are paying the one rupee 50 paise required, which is the minimum balance required for your 100 rupee credit thing, it will soon start incurring interest, and that interest will accumulate, and you'll have to start paying more in terms of not just 1 rupee 50 paise, but perhaps a minimum of at least 4 rupees 50 paise, right? And it is increasing your debt. It is not decreasing your debt. It is not decreasing your balance. It is not giving you a higher credit rating. Your credit rating is going down. So you're constantly in the zone of needs and wants. You're not even, so if you end up paying a majority of the money, you basically are going towards your expectation, which means you're able to utilize your existing credit limit. But that in any way is not giving you the opportunity to increase your credit limit, to increase a different way of life. In order to increase that credit limit, in order to be able to see a better way of retaining credit, what must you do? You must obviously be paying not the minimum required limit, but clearing the maximum required limit, so that you have a maximum credit limit. And at the same, which means that you have the income to be able to manage your credit limit. Am I right? So when you start doing that, you basically you're fulfilling the expectations that are set around your income levels. So which means that this is now giving you the ability to think, okay, what better can I do? What higher can I achieve? What more effective ways I can, and that is when you walk towards your aspiration. So the essence of research itself, the essence of movement itself of this graph is that you try to shift the point zero, which is the XY axis strategic value, and to as higher a limit as possible. If you see my cursor moving, if it starts moving, it is moving towards aspiration. And that's a straight line. And that aspiration is your future. It is the same thing to any organization as well. So rather than just plot your past, you have to have the ability to plot your future. If you're able to plot your future, what you're doing is you're moving the point of origin, okay, to a higher level. As you're moving the point of origin to a higher level, very quickly your aspiration is now becoming your need. And this, in a sense, is the higher threshold of capability on the XY plot that you're shifting. So I'm going back to that fundamental question that I started asking at the beginning of this presentation, where intent drives strategy. So is it a good strategy to persist in the present and in the past? Or is it a good strategy to basically say, okay, this is how we improve the future, and these are the actions that we need to take, and this is the roadmap we need to create, and move into that future from the present? I definitely want an answer for this from the audience here. Which is better? Can somebody tell me, please? So here is a question. I'm assuming most of you or all of you are faculty. I mean, are you okay with your classes being silent to the questions that you raise in a lecture?
All of you, please respond.
Sir, I guess it is the need of the hour.
What is the need of the hour?
To reach your aspirations.
Yeah.
And
So,
the intent, that that drives you to reach that aspiration. So the strategies that you would be utilizing would help in reaching that aspiration.
correct. So how are we going to change? So this is the question that we have been talking about, right? This graph is being put here
Yes.
is how do we create a purpose-driven research, right? In the previous slide, we talked about the 5 different types of research strategies. And this framework of plotting the XY is relevant to all the 5. However, how you frame those questions is basically what you will get the purpose. The purpose will be driven out of what, why, how, when, where, and who, right? So that is the essential part of basically looking at this XY plot. So the question that I had framed here is, I gave you an example of a credit card. So for example, if I'm coming back and asking you, how do you come out of this conundrum of being able to meet increasing your credit limit from 100 rupees to 1,000 rupees? If this was a basic question that you needed to do research on, okay, if you were given this opportunity to say, hey, as a faculty, you have a class of 50 people. How do you take a maximum of them to be able to create an A+ grade or get a CGPA of 5.0? My question to you is, what would you do with a graph like this?
Maybe we can be more supportive towards, or sensitive maybe towards their needs. Maybe something that would interest them, or something that would drive them, push them towards, and understand that, and then maybe take it from there.
Why needs? Because for them, their stated needs, they don't understand. For example, what you're teaching is a pedagogy. So suppose you want to say, so let me bring this new dimension. So for example, in MIT, there is one section of the undergrad where, and many of you are probably teaching undergrad as well as grad school. So there is one section of undergrad in MIT where they do not have classrooms. They do not have a unified syllabus. So basically, students come in, they create projects, and they find the people from the industry. They find professors. They schedule the lectures based on the availability of professors, and they undertake these projects, and they work on projects, and their graduation is based on how successfully they are working on those projects. Now, this is something that is happening. This may sound very futuristic for many of you, but this is actually happening in an industry right now. If this were to happen in educational institutions in India, okay, and we were basically to take this and put this into this map, of setting the aspirations and working towards that of your students, of your classroom, how would you do it? This is so your students don't know that there is something like this that can happen. They only know that they have to take admission into a university. They have to write an entrance exam. They pass through it. They will have to seek admission, and when they get admission into your college, there is an administration that would have scheduled lectures based on the kind of people that is recruited, and they will have to come and attend those classes. Then they have to write exams, and if they pass, they will get a university degree. This is what they know. But now you're changing that entire percept into the way in which they learn. You're changing the pedagogy, right? How do you orient them towards that pedagogy? That's my question. right? Because this is why you're doing this research. To understand from these students, what is it that they don't know? And how do you therefore strategize in order to be able to get them to know that, hey, there is a new way of learning. And this new way of learning can be a more effective, better way. What do you call that? Do you call that an aspiration? Do you call that an expectation? Do you call that a need or a want? Anyway, so that's the aspirational. That's the aspirational. Now, the reason I brought this subject of research, and I had asked this question earlier, that it is not necessary. I'm now coming back to Zora, the perspective that, you know, in the past, there was a division that did this research, perhaps the University Grant Commission, and then somebody designed a pedagogy, and that pedagogy was basically passed down, right? And then it was executed by all the institutions that are associated with the University Grants Commission and so on and so forth. But that has changed. Today you can influence a new pedagogy because you believe that your subjects need to be taught differently, need to meld with the world differently, and make a change, make a difference, make a transformation in life. Right? Not just come into a classroom where students just show up, get a lecture that has been taught through a textbook for 50 years, and go there and write an examination. So it's a very different world we are talking about, right? So I think this influence of research can be done from a very micro level, from the students to the faculty to the administrators to the entire ecosystem, to the ones that are the government, the influencers. And we have the technology today to be able to connect, to be able to correlate all the 5 types of research that we're talking about. We can ask those questions. So research is nothing but asking the questions and finding answers to shape our life, right? Isn't that what research is all about? So I think today we have a very different environment that enables us to think and act differently. And so where I'm coming back to connect design thinking and design is when you think, so this kind of action that, hey, I must try out a new way of teaching. I must try out a better way of learning, can only happen when you create these little experiments. You find that what is the resistance there is to it. You are able to overcome the resistance and are able to bring people together to this new movement forward. Right?
So you can continue, sir.
Okay. So this is basically where we are trying to plot a different way of taking the strategy forward, from the present. So there is I introduced 2 terms here. One was the term called strategic inflection point, to be able to recognize what that strategic inflection point is, and then be able to plot whether to go forward or whether to go backward. Obviously, all the work that we do essentially is to drive forward, and therefore it has to be aspirational. If it has to be aspirational, there has to be more people involved, and that purpose is very clearly defined. You use this XY plot to be able to understand the present, but also what the future is. So you plot where you are currently, which would perhaps be the needs and wants and expectations But you also plot the future by immersing and getting a understanding of that point of arrival where you would make a difference to life from the where you are currently. That intersection of that point where you are versus where you need to be should basically be the point, that you define how the growth should be. I will actually exit this point with one another very simple understanding. If tomorrow any one of us wanted to basically beat Usain Bolt's Olympic record or world record, and we go to a coach, a running coach, and tell him, so what would the coach do? The coach would basically say, okay, run. Show me how what your speed is, what your endurance is, what your strength is, what your discipline is, what your diet is, what your sleeping pattern is, right? He will collect all this data and he will assess your current performance. Your future aspiration is the record that Usain Bolt holds, which is, you ran at 16 point something, 16.5 seconds, 100 meters. Usain Bolt runs the same 100 meters at 9 point some seconds. Now you need to bridge that 7 or 8 seconds, and bridging those 7 or 8 seconds has taken Usain Bolt about 3 years of intense practice and dedication and development. Now you need to know, and for you, if you want to become a Usain Bolt, you have to define that is your time. So there are 5 qualities that you need to be able to measure in order to be able to move forward. What is the quality? Is how, if you did something, how well can you do it the first time, which is quality. Doing it right the first time is quality. Then the cost, whether it is what is the equipment you require, what is the coaching you require, what is the amount of money you need to spend, what it costs you, the time, the empathy of, how the coach, the trainer, everyone will work with you to your requirement, and flexibility is how well can you basically, these are the 5 qualities that will shape the outcome, the 5 perceptions of value. So you need to be able to take that and create an XY plot and then say, this is my aspiration, this is where I am, and this is how I'm going to move forward. So you might move, 2 seconds, 0.2 seconds a day, or you can move 0.20 seconds a day, which will get you faster. Each one has a different plot. So you need to be able to understand that and move your aspiration forward, whether it is at an individual level, whether it is a collective level of organization or society or a nation, right? So the whole idea of a purpose-driven research has to be reshaped to the context of how we are utilizing that strategic point of inflection and how we are moving forward, how we are able to shape strategies that allow us to move forward and not backward, right? Which means that there is a definitive improvement in the quality of our lives. It doesn't just mean that, you have now a mobile application which allows you to bank. It was increase your ability to earn an income and therefore spend. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
So I think that is the context in which I also put the example of the credit card. I just want at least one answer from all of you. Did all of you understand the example of the credit card and the credit limit and what is required in order to be able to change that course of discourse on the 100 rupee credit limit becoming a 1,000 rupee credit limit? How many participants do we have actually today?
So with us, we are having 73 now.
Okay. Is there any reason why I'm not getting any of the 73 other than 1 or 2 to respond? Because it is very difficult for me to do a lecture without a response.
So I can understand.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So essentially, we talked about the research. So research is about three things. Research is about inquiry, which is basically reflection on the what. And then based on that what, exploration. Exploration is finding different pathways. And discovery is about arriving at the optimum. Right? The optimum is basically defined. So, as I said in just a minute ago, we can either go to the left, which is the innocence to mediocrity, or we can go to the right, which is the innocence to excellence. Because we are in a in a situation where we need to progress that much faster. We have the technology, we have the tools, we have the methodologies, we have seen considerable progress in human endeavor. Today, I think it would be a fallacy to continue to focus on the scale of innocence to mediocrity. But when you examine the society to a large extent, that is what is happening. So even on the previous XY scale, if you plotted the innocence to mediocrity, you would continue to be in the downward two slots, which is the needs and the wants. But if you were progressing and you had a way to progress, you would see yourself in the innocence to excellence. So the key of dimension and attributes. So you need to have research today needs to basically shift from a very abstract methodology to a very specific, very accurate, very specific methodology. And in order to do that, and I think the question, and I'm again going back to Zora's observation, we are in a position in history right now to be able to say that how do we create the process of inquiry, what is possible, what is the potential, so we can take dimensions and we can create attributes of the dimension, which, for example, then we examine, are we even imagining it, are we even there, to understand where we are currently. So the innocence to excellence is a scale. So innocence is what happened, I hear about something, right? This is when you say you're innocent. The next step is awareness. So when you move from innocence to awareness, you are aware of that subject that people are talking about. You hear a lot of things. When that awareness moves into understanding, you're able to say what it will do for you. That understanding, when it moves into definition, you're able to say, okay, this is good for me, and I need to be able to build this into my lifestyle. That is the definition. Competence is when you're able to incorporate that discipline into your lifestyle. And excellence is when you are the best at doing that. So in an ideal situation, if you're going on a progressive path, you have to be able to plot constantly towards being between competence and excellence. But you will find that at many times, you will find yourself at innocence, and that is only when you are tuned in, when you are aware of your surroundings and what happens in your environment, right? So on the other hand, the scale to the left is, again, innocence is when you basically are told, like, today I'm giving you a subject. I don't know to how many of you, this is the first time that you're hearing about the different ways in which design research strategies can be created. But what do you do with that, right? Is if you are able to take that, understanding of what is being explained to you, and if you are oblivious to it, if you just say, okay, I'm listening to this, it doesn't make a difference to me, that's being oblivious. And indifference is further as, okay, I was supposed to basically come to this lecture and sit down and listen to it, so I've just logged in. And then limiting is when, despite the fact that, a new theory has been explained to you, you're not unwilling to build that into your repertoire. And incompetence reflects when you are not able to take that and implement it, and that results in mediocrity, right? So there are two ways in which you can look at that building of dimension and attributes and utilizing it. So going back, every one of us, okay, is born and to basically think about design thinking is not something that was invented by either IDEO Labs or Stanford University. It's a huge fallacy. We're all born, with the ability to design think, to be strategic in our intent. Because if you really look at a little child, a 2-year-old child who is never taught Newtonian physics, okay, that child is able to adjust their little butts and enjoy a swing. Okay, they have not been taught the laws of inertia, they're not been taught the laws of velocity, but they by nature know how to experience that swing and go higher and enjoy that moment. But that is basically what we limit ourselves when we try to understand the theory of it, and we are not able to replicate that velocity, that inertia into other aspects of mechanics that we work with. Right? So what is it that we are doing? We are learning a theory and we're limiting ourselves. And we're limiting ourselves to incompetence and mediocrity. And so, researching about that and implementing more mediocrity is actually detrimental to the way in which we are living. And that is reflected, for example, today when we talk about our education system, and this is not just India, in anywhere in the world, to a large extent, the pedagogy that we teach, we're very proud to basically keep saying, that somebody said education did not interfere with my learning. But we haven't done anything about that in the last, whatever number of years. But now we have that strategic inflection point where we can shift the trajectory of education. We can make it immersive. We can make it absolutely learning in nature, right? So we look at the proliferation, for example, of the unacademies and other so-called online learning. How is that different from what you teach in the classrooms? It isn't, except that they're trying to bring in a very modularized way, a more involved way. How can you shape that and bring that part of learning into your classrooms? Is a question that we can all influence. So you need to be able to understand how to do that, and that how to do is basically the inquiry. If you start creating, and then the exploration is the various dimensions of that. If you start exploring, where are we? Are we at an innocence, or are we at an excellence, or are we at innocence, or are we at a mediocrity? If you try to find that scale, this is the research that gives you the discovery that you basically take from the research that you do, should basically be able to allow you to create a strategy to improve education, right? So this is the sense of trying to create a design strategy and be able to implement it, but implement it not from the old methods and means of doing research strategies, but looking at it from a very fundamentally new way of using technology, of using the right methods in order to be able to do research where a majority of the people can be involved in the way in which you shape and shift to the future. So Zora, I'm actually coming back to the point we discussed. So has your opinion changed now in terms of, not just getting a perspective, but getting an involvement of a majority of people to be participative in the process of design research? Okay, let's move to the next one, please. So now we have a research that can be digital in nature. So there are 5 C's. This is a methodology that I have authored, and in fact, I'm implementing this methodology in my a new venture, which is Giga, the Future of Work, which is to create, connect, curate, contextualize, and collaborate. So today, research is not something that is done in a discrete manner once and then it sets your strategy moving. Research is a continuous process that basically profiles and gets you demography, personalizes and gets you biography, and preferentiates and gets you psychography. And data on all the 3 are equally important for you to be able to connect to your ecosystem. The ecosystem has 3 parts to it. There is a customer, industry, and life ecosystem to which you need to connect and graduate. When you make that connection enables you to refine, curate the data. So it is all about data. It was previously about data. Research was that you collected it on pen and paper and processed it on Excel spreadsheets. Today you have real live systems that can basically do this. And we call that artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, it should actually now graduate. So up to the point of contextualization is the artificial intelligence. It gives you the intelligence. You refine the connections to personalization requirements, and then you contextualize it for preferentiation. Personal is basically, it is very distinct to an entity and a role, and context preferentiation is basically the preference that is distinction, that with distinction. That's why it's a combined word called preferentiation. And when you move to, and then you use, today we are in a world, the digital world is one where you have shared systems with a unified structure, synergy, and systems. So systems comes only third. Before the systems, you need to have a structure. The structure is basically your connections, and the synergy is basically the culture that we talk about, which is values, beliefs, and assumptions. This connects you in order to basically create systems that enable you to interact and in a researched manner every single minute, not once in every few years or every few months or every few days, but every single micro nanosecond, to be able to change the course of your life, your strategy, your ability to execute and create a better life. So we are in a very different environment today. Technology is moving from digital technology to quantum computing, which allows you to basically go both wider and deeper in terms of being able to compute data, not process data. And it allows you to be able to come out with results that you can reshape the world, not in a few years or decades. For example, we have had the government of India, Prime Minister Modi, talk about India being carbon neutral, 100% carbon neutral by 2070. I think many of us may not even be alive in 2070. So the point is, how do we even create a vision where we are not able to contribute towards it? So we have to be able to see, okay, if 2070 is 100% carbon neutral, what is it that we have to do today in our environment? How can we measure that? How can we measure that we have taken the first step in 2021 that enables us to be able to say, yeah, we are on the path of 2070? Or can we reduce it? That is the sense of looking at strategic design research. How do we build our structure, systems, and synergy and systems, and how we go about it? That essentially is a new method, is a new way that we are compelled to look at digital research as a not a discrete process, but as a continuous process. Right? Can we go to the next slide, please? So typically, if you looked at how the research has progressed, right? You will basically find that you move from data to information, and you left it to a large extent. When you moved, you saw data, you saw it with biases. We humans are all biased. We see data the way we want to see it, right? But how do you take the biases out of it is basically the inference part of it to a large extent, is being accomplished or should be accomplished by artificial intelligence that moves into cognitive intelligence. Cognitive intelligence is creating new patterns and being able to act on those patterns. Inference is still reading old patterns, patterns that are established. So we are working towards a more intelligent society, which works in real time, which works with cognitive intelligence, intelligence that is shaped by creating new patterns and subsisting with them even as we live. Right? This essentially is the progression of research. So, due to a lack of response, I've covered the last 3 slides without asking you questions. But I think I've kind of created a very new paradigm in terms of your understanding of research and design research strategies. I'm going to pause here and ask you, does anybody have any responses to these 3 slides so I can go back and talk about it? Okay, so moving to the next slide. The essence of what we are looking at research is, we have so far looked at research from a problem perspective. It's only a glass half full now, or half empty. Now we need to be able to complete that with the opportunity. So the Chinese symbol for problem, if you reverse it, it's also opportunity. So we have to be able to look at it first from an opportunity point of view, and then essentially then you come to the point of how do you do that from a so problem automatically should basically absolve into the opportunity and not the other way around. We find a lot of problems in any of the areas that we talked about that are all human created. We have, for example, the entire planet, the UN scientists have issued a code red warning for humanity. So this is not created by some aliens. We have created them. And each one of us has the ability, the responsibility, the accountability to be able to say, how can we move towards a carbon neutral future? How can we create something? How can we contribute something towards climate change? So the idea is that we can all be involved in terms of being able to create a better society, and we can all be involved with that with the concept of design research strategy, and build a better design research strategy that enables us to take a progressive path rather than a regressive path. Okay, so next slide. Basically, I want to pause here, ask you if there are any questions, and I'd like to take questions.
Any queries? Participants, any queries?
Okay, so I guess we are at 11:18. There are no questions. I have, Dr. Syed, please feel free to, distribute my presentation to the participants. I have given you my contacts. You're very welcome to ask me any questions anytime. I come from a thinking where I say that learning has to liberate us, not bound us. So I would be happy to share my perspectives with you at any given point in time. I would like to learn from you, and I would be happy to share what I know, what little I know. I'm happy that I'm having this opportunity to share my perspectives with you. I look forward to interacting with you in the future. So this is, I think we will end this first session now, perhaps to reassemble for the next session at 11:30. And Dr. Syed, if I can please request you to give me a call, I'd be grateful. You have a
Yes,
number.
sir.
You
Sure,
have my
sir.
number.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sir, thank you so much for your valuable insights. So we'll be back in around 15 minutes. Is that okay, ma'am?
Yes, Ankita.
Okay.